All right, hello everyone. Welcome to episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And for my very special guest today, I have none other than Big Al of the channel Big Al Does BookTube. Hello, Al. It is wonderful to see you today.
My Gavanen, Philip.
All right. Yeah, awesome. So your channel, Big Al Does BookTube. I have been curious. But first of all, everyone, this is not the first time that Al has been on my channel. He's been in one of the Adan trilogy discussions over here, which it was a blast, and one of the earlier ones actually. And I'm so honored that Al, you read the Adan trilogy. And it might come up today or might not. We'll see. But I have this burning question I want to ask you. Why are you Big Al?
Actually, it's kind of a Robin Hood reference. I'm not that big.
Okay.
Uh,
I mean, I wasn't gonna ask how tall are you or how much do you weigh or anything like that, but you're not actually a big
no, not at
person.
all.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I'm like 5'8", 180 pounds or something. I'm just a small guy, really. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, I used to be. I don't need to get into what I used to be, but basically, it was a bit of camaraderie. People used to call me Big Al
I
because
gotcha.
the owls, I was the smaller one, so
So it's like Little John.
just like Little John, exactly
Yeah. Except
in
John was
reverse.
big. Yeah. Okay. That is great. I mean, you can't tell how tall people are on this platform, because we're just basically talking heads. And I've often had people, for some reason, other people tend to think that I'm taller than I actually am. But I'm 5'10". So, but yeah, it's funny. But it's the mystery solved. Now we know why.
There you go. It's not. I'm sorry, it's not very exciting, but
I mean, it kind of is. I mean, at some point, one of your mates, when your buddies started calling you Big Al,
yeah, that's it.
and it stuck, I guess, over the years.
Yeah, it's just when people can't think of what to call me, they just call me that.
I like it. I like it. So obviously, people can probably tell by your accent that you're English, and I haven't talked about this a ton, but I was when I was a teen, I was an incorrigible Anglophile. I loved England, everything about it. Wanted to go over there. Finally made it over to the UK, actually, to England and Wales. When I was 19 was the first time I went on my own, backpacking all over the place, learning Welsh in Wales, and just having a great time over there. Wonderful part of the world, in my opinion. And of course, as a medievalist who studies Old English, that's my thing. There's so much in England for me to see and do. I love it over there. So, unfortunately, I have the opportunity. I've had the opportunity to go many, many times and visit all places, sorts of places. So, yeah, I'm kind of jealous, though. I mean, it's just probably people who are from that area are like, yeah, well, it's just, yeah, we have Roman ruins here. We have, this old Anglo-Saxon church over there, and it's just like that's just sort of like stuff that happens to be there all the time, right? For me, I'm just like, I don't know. That's how it is for me anyway. But
Yeah, I think that's how it is for everyone, isn't it? Really.
yeah,
Anytime I've gone over to the States, I've always been like, oh wow, look how big everything is.
yeah.
But again, I'm sure if architecture is your thing, we have lots of lovely architecture.
Oh, I love Gothic
Yeah,
cathedrals and stuff like that. You have some good ones there. Yeah. So yeah, cars here are bigger, houses are bigger. Yeah, probably people on average are
I'd
as
say
well.
so.
But so you've been to the States.
Yeah, a couple of times. Just on holiday though, not to live or anything like that. Just a couple of weeks here and there. But yeah, what I can say about the States, other than the food, which I obviously love to eat, as most
Ah,
people do, is just the nicest people. Just lovely. I love traveling around Europe, but I just find the manners so impeccable in the US. I really really do feel
ah.
welcome anytime I've been. So
You obviously did not come to New Jersey then.
I've been to New Jersey. Yeah,
No,
I'd say it's a little bit more like London there, where most people are pretty nice. So.
Yeah. Unless you're on the road and, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I to be honest, what surprised me is the amount of use of the horn.
Oh yeah.
People honking their horns in their cars. I'd never heard so much, liberal use of a horn before,
Really?
as I did in New Jersey.
Well,
It's
in New Jersey, when people use the horn, they're letting you know that they're pissed off. And you know, that's basically what it's for. I've been in parts of the world though, like in South Asia, where the horn is used way more, and it's used for a multitude of purposes. Often it's to say, "Here I am, look out!" Deet, 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 you know. But
yes,
the buses over there, they have elaborate. I mean, they have like whole songs that the horn will play, and it's like, and it does this whole, you know, and it's this big rigmarole. In fact, when I lived in Kathmandu, I lived next to a bus park in a part of Kathmandu called Gangabu. And every morning at like 5 a.m., the bus drivers would start warming up their horns and doing all these like songs and everything. And he's just like, okay, here we go. But yeah, no, they use horns a lot more over there. And sometimes it's to tell you that somebody's not happy with you. But more often than not, it's just, you know, I think in the UK, the horns are used for similar reasons to how they're used
it's
here in the States.
exactly that. Yeah, we're taught to only use it to let people know we're there if we think we're in someone's blind spot or something. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a little beep beep. I feel like it's duration as well. Is you're sending a signal. So if you're behind somebody at a traffic light and they're sitting there and it's green, you don't want to go, "Ah," you want to
No,
just go deep deep,
definitely
you know.
not.
It's green, deep deep, you know. You know. But if you're really mad at somebody who just cut you off and almost caused an accident, then you're laying on the horn, you know, for a good 3 seconds at least, I would say. Yeah.
I'll say
So
it's accurate.
so we're not actually here for driving discourse,
No,
but I find cultural differences to be an endless source of fascination. And you know, we share a language, even though you know we Americans do our own thing with it. You know, in some ways, we're actually more conservative than English speakers in some respects. I mean, there's an R in all those words for a reason. You guys just lost all those R's, you know. But we kept the R's, you know. And you got all those extra U's all over the place in your spelling, you know, like in
we
color.
do love a you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but anyway, let's talk about books and stuff. So I have this standard question that I love to ask people. And I am actually really curious about your answer to this. And that is going on the premise that you are what you read, Al. What have been some of the most important formative reads in your life that have brought you to the point where you have a YouTube channel? Which, by the way, everybody, subscribe to his channel. I think it's one of the hidden gems right now in BookTube, frankly. Wonderful reviews, very short. I think you're doing so many things right. There's a diversity of books that you talk about on your channel. You do a lot of fantasy and stuff, but you do a lot of other stuff too, classics and you know all kinds of good stuff. So, but anyway, what brought you to this point where you started a channel, and what are some of the big important reads in your life, and when did you come across them?
So I would say that I've not always been a reader, um, but the fact that I'm reading now and the fact that I've ever been into reading is all down to my father, who would read to me when I was little. I'm sure that rings true with a lot of people. But other than children's books, the Wind in the Willows or Winnie the Pooh, when I was very little, it was a couple of books. I've got here with me. First one I want to talk about is Treasure Island. So
Ah,
my father read Treasure Island to me when I was young, and that really captured my imagination. I'm sure all young uh, children love pirates and adventures and stuff like that, and it's a
yeah.
book that scared the life out of me when I was a kid. A couple of scenes in that book terrified me, absolutely terrified me, but it really got me interested in reading. And I went on to read that as I grew up. Uh, the second book that I always remember having read to me that I probably didn't grasp as well at a young age was The Hobbit.
Oh,
Yeah, so my father loves The Hobbit. Probably more than he loves Lord of the Rings. And yeah, he read that to me um, when I was young. And I always remember the riddles between Gollum and Bilbo really kind of stuck in my mind when I was young. And it was actually one of the first books I ever bought with my own money. I remember being in middle school. I think it was they did a re-release of the paperback in like '91, and it had Smaug lying on the gold, and it was kind of lit up by the bounce light off of the gold,
That's a
and it's such a
Tolkien
beautiful
illustration.
cover.
That's one of Tolkien's own illustrations you're talking about. That image. Oh,
No, it's actually not. I think it's an Alan Lee illustration.
oh, okay, okay. All right.
Yeah, from when I think yeah he all the books, all of the works were kind of re-released between like '91 and '94 in the
Yeah,
UK.
he's done some brilliant
Um,
illustrations.
yeah,
This one I have here is all Alan Lee inside.
oh, so beautiful. I absolutely love the work he did. I do love the original illustrations, but I've kind of got like a copy of each, like the original illustrations and Alan Lee ones
Yeah.
for all of the Tolkien books, really, because they're just
Yeah.
you've got to have it, really. But
I mean,
yeah, so
you can't have too many copies of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, can you?
you actually can't. I'm
No.
starting to learn, actually. It's more fun the more you get. Um, yeah, so that was quite a big deal for me because it was a book that I struggled to read. I remember finding it quite tough to read at 8 or 9 years old, but quite persevering because I wanted to get to the parts that I remember my father reading to me. 'Cause I've never been the strongest reader. I remember being a little bit behind other people at school. I think if it wasn't for fantasy or for adventure books, I probably never would have caught up
Yeah,
because I always did
yeah.
struggle quite a lot at school.
I do
And
want
it
to
was
ask
really,
did your father do voices when he read The Hobbit to you? Like, did
he
he do?
wasn't the greatest of voices. He
Okay.
tried. He tried. I've tried to be better as a father myself to my own children. I tried to do all the Pratchett voices in the Terry Pratchett books to my
Oh, brilliant. Oh,
Discworld books to my kids.
so you read The
I'm not.
Hobbit to your kids as well? You That's something you
I
do?
have tried to read The Hobbit to my kids, yeah, but I think it's just a little bit too long for the little ones at the moment.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
They get a couple hundred pages in, and it's hard for them to fall asleep more often than not. So
I read
yeah,
it
I
to
have certainly
my
tried.
daughters when they were little. I read The Hobbit. It was one of the first things I wanted to read to them, and just a bit every night, and I did a Gollum. I had a Gollum voice, and I had, the different voices. I loved doing the Gollum part. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that's a book I think that's tied a few generations together now, The Hobbit. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. So
Cool.
it's a beautiful book, and I really think, and this is probably a weird thing to say, but I just think all of Tolkien's work is very underrated. I don't know where it happened. Something happened. I don't know when it happened, but it became like cool to not like it or something. I'm not sure what happened,
That
but
always happens. Every time
yeah,
something gets
it's
big,
bizarre though.
there's a reaction where it's cool to rebel. It's a teenager thing. And a
Yeah,
lot of I think a lot of times it's a shame, but I think a lot of writers are somehow reluctant to acknowledge their influences and sometimes even want to show that they're casting off this influence and that they're doing their own thing. And when really we're not telling any new stories. There's nothing new under the sun, in my opinion. I think a lot of the times we have this, yeah, I mean, you can handle some of these things in new ways, I suppose, but honestly, I think most people who write books are much more beholden to those who have come before than they would like to acknowledge. But that's my personal feeling on that. So
I'd agree. And I think that comes with almost all art. Um,
yeah,
Eventually, we tend to. I mean, it was a massive, obviously, resurgence in modern art, and I think that a lot of that comes from people trying to break through, trying to get away from those influences a little bit. But
yeah,
it's impossible as a human being with our limited five senses to really break out. We do our best, but
yeah.
this is our spectrum, isn't it? That we experience. So we're just creatures of our environment at the end of the day. So
That's true. I think so too. Yeah, yeah. Speaking of
Yeah.
which, and speaking of creatures of our environment, we're back to your narrative. So can't remember where we were, but I think we left off
Oh
on
yeah, I just wanted to mention one more
okay, from your
kind of
childhood.
one more author that was quite important to me when I was young was this guy Steve Jackson.
Ah, okay.
Um, he is probably most only known in the UK,
Uh-huh.
but in the 80s, obviously, like Dungeons and Dragons, the kind of late 70s into the 80s was really, really important to probably a lot of. I think I remember a couple of your guests actually mentioning Dungeons and Dragons has been a bit of
Oh,
an
yeah.
influence. Well, in the UK, something that run concurrently with Dungeons and Dragons was like adventure books, like choose your own adventure books.
Okay. Huh.
And Steve Jackson, he wrote some like traditional kind of sword and sorcery books as well as choose your own adventure books.
Uh-huh.
And anytime I was in a bit of a reading rut, I would always go to like a choose your own adventure book because the small paragraphs and the very easy reads, and they always
Yeah.
draw you in. And in the 80s, I was too little really to play Dungeons and Dragons with my older cousins and stuff. So I would kind of use that was kind of my Dungeons and Dragons. I would read one of those books as
Cool.
kind of my escapism, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of, other than classics that you kind of get put in front of you at school, and people tend to talk about, or autobiographies and things like that. I suppose what the general reading public go to, Penguin Classics, or the latest autobiography or something. I basically then didn't read until one day I walked into work, and someone I worked with was talking. We were basically discussing the first still images of the Game of Thrones TV show.
Ah.
And I said, "Have you seen the images of Sean Bean with this sword, sitting on this throne and stuff?" And the guy I worked with just started laughing at me. He's like, "You must have been living under a rock, because there's this whole book series called The Song of Ice and Fire, and this show's based on this book series.
Huh.
And you have to pick it up and read it. You have to read it. You're not allowed to watch the show unless you've read the books." He said basically it's a bit of a gatekeeping thing for him to say, but
But I
I
like
thought
it. I like
I'll
it.
give it a go. So I tried to read the books alongside the show, but unfortunately, I'm a slow reader, or was a very slow reader at the time, because I feel like reading is one of those things, like, at least for me, like practice is how you get good at reading.
Yeah.
And if you're out of practice, you will be probably quite rusty
Yep.
when it comes to
That's
reading.
with
I
any
found myself
any skill.
extremely rusty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I struggled actually to keep up with the reading along with the show. The show kept getting ahead of me when I was trying to read the books.
Ah.
But I think if it wasn't for those books, like a Game of Thrones, I probably wouldn't have a BookTube channel, because, like you, I didn't know there was people on BookTube. I didn't realize there was people talk about fantasy books online. I was talking to some people at work, and I said, "Look, I finished these Song of Ice and Fire books. I don't think the new book's coming out anytime soon. What should I read next? Give me something to read. Give me some recommendations." So they gave me a bunch of recommendations. They told me about Mark Lawrence and Joe Abercrombie. So I
Cool.
started picking these books up, and they said, "But why are you asking us? Why haven't you gone onto YouTube and looked up BookTube?" I didn't have a clue what they were talking about, to be fair. But then I found Mike and I found you, and
Nice.
here we
Someone as
are.
clueless as I was. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was completely clueless, the whole thing. I knew what YouTube was, but I didn't realize people talked about books on there, and definitely not fantasy books. That was a complete surprise to me. Then, yeah, I spent probably 6 months to a year watching you guys when you
No
first
kidding.
started your channels during COVID and all of that, just like everyone did. I used to comment, but obviously I had a different YouTube account then, so you guys probably didn't know that I was watching your channels for ages
Oh, was
first.
that you back then? Okay. You'll have to tell
Um,
me when we're done what your username was. I might remember. But yeah.
I mean, if you ever had Skeletor come up in your comment section, my picture used to be Skeletor,
Oh yeah, I
so I
remember
used to
that.
just, yeah, I wasn't a massive commenter or anything, but I would pop in
Right.
sometimes as Skeletor, yeah.
That was you. Okay. That's great. I have had a few interesting people who would be leaving comments early in the channel and then later would start a channel. Another one is Johan from Library of a Viking. He was one of my early subscribers, actually. And now his channel is way bigger than mine. So go figure, right?
It's a good channel.
Oh, he does a lot of good things on there. Yeah. But so anyway, it's kind of fun to figure out, oh, that was that person back then. Okay. I do vaguely recall a person with a Skeletor icon, leaving the occasional comment. So, all right, nice. And if you just change that to Big Al Does BookTube, that Skeletor image is gone now on even your old comments. It would appear.
I'm terrible at remembering like emails and stuff and logins. So
Uh-huh.
when I forget how to log in, I usually just create a new account. So
Oh.
so I just create a. I thought, oh, I should try to continue on this account that I had. In fact, I even had a YouTube channel a long time ago when YouTube was younger, pre 2010, I suppose.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
where it was nothing to do with books. Much more successful than I am now. But yeah, I couldn't take that
Do
channel
you
over and
mind saying what that channel was about? What the subject
I
was?
used to for a little while to kind of supplement my income. I used to do reviewing for video games when they came out.
Oh, no
So
kidding.
sometimes if I had some reviews that weren't going up on a website, I might just put them online in a video form.
Okay.
I wasn't massively successful. I only had like 500 or 600 subscribers, but
Uh-huh.
initially I was thinking, oh, I'll use that account to launch my BookTube account, but I couldn't remember the logins or anything. I just start from scratch.
So you
I just
started over. That's funny. But video game channels tend to be way bigger than book channels,
oh
alas. Yeah.
yeah.
So, but so A Song of Ice and Fire was the thing that brought you back into reading, it sounds like. That
Yeah, I would say the thing that brought me here is trying to find out what the next A Song of Ice and Fire was,
okay.
which I've had the strongest feeling since day one will be Malazan. Um,
Oh, okay.
that's what I always assumed it would be, but that's why I've not touched it yet.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to delay because I feel like it'll be so much in my wheelhouse of what I enjoy. It's like a lot of authors that I know I'm gonna love or I assume I'm gonna love. I've put
Yeah.
off until very late to read,
Yeah.
like Alexander Dumas, Philip K. Dick,
Yeah.
Stephen Erickson. I've purposely been putting all these authors off because I feel like I want to sprinkle them in, and give them each a little bit of time. So
I have a feeling, and it's going to be interesting to watch you when you do start reading Malazan, because I have a feeling, based on what I've seen of your tastes, I think you're going to love that series. I think there's a lot there for you to sink your teeth in, and you tend to like, I feel like you tend to like kind of often, at least, the more literary end of fantasy. And Malazan is definitely the more literary end of, if I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but it is very theme driven work.
yeah,
Um, and I think that you tend to be someone who likes that sort of thing. So I suspect that it's going to be a big hit. I will be watching when you start reading Malazan and seeing what you think. So that's exciting. So you haven't read anything yet, Malazan?
no. So I've got Gone to the Moon penciled in for around the 20th of February,
Oh,
somewhere around there that
okay.
I'll begin. But I'll read the first 5 books this year and the second 5 books next year,
Okay, good
and then
plan.
I'll figure out a reading order, I suppose. Because I would like to be able to, with any world that I want to get my teeth into, I want to be able to read everything. So I want
Okay,
to make sure that I read all of the Esselmont books. Um, but
good.
like I'm doing with like I wish I'd found something as useful as I did with Stephen King, where
Uh-huh.
there are so many resources out there and there's so many kind of threads and discussions you can get a real feel for what you want to take in and what you want to leave on the table kind of thing.
Yeah,
um
yeah,
because I'm really hoping this is going to be the one, because I'm going to be brutally honest. um Tolkien's just so far above everything I've read,
yeah.
as far as fantasy goes. It's so far. Um, And I feel like A Song of Ice and Fire was something I could really get my teeth into. It didn't really hit as hard as Tolkien, but it's something I can reflect on a lot because there's so much depth, mostly in the world building rather than the themes.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah, I agree with that.
but,
Yeah.
but I would really like something that gives me the themes, the quality of prose, and the deep world building. I would like a little bit of everything. I know it's
That's
asking a lot.
Malazan. Yeah. That's Malazan. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're going to start with the Malazan Book of the Fallen, I guess, and later on add the novels of the Malazan Empire and the Bokalane and Corbel Broach novellas and the Carcanis trilogy, at least the two books that are out so far. God is Not Willing, the sequel trilogy that the first book in the Witness trilogy is out. The God is Not Willing, and oh yeah, Paths to Ascendancy, which is the prequel series that Esselmont is putting out. He has 4 books in that so far. Each of those is kind of sort of a standalone. The first 3 sort of go together, and then the next one is almost like a standalone, really. So yeah, the Forge of the High Mage, the recent one. So yeah, there's lots for you to do there. That's a big playground right there, the Malazans. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what you make of it all. But yeah, cool. Well, and I'm sure there's a fair number of my subscribers who will be curious to see as well, because I kind of grew up as a channel doing Malazan myself, really. I mean, that was one of the things I knew I wanted to do. I had read Malazan Book of the Fallen before starting a channel, and I always thought I'm gonna need to reread that series. Um, and it's worth rereading, and I know I'm gonna get a lot more from it. I got a lot from it the first time, but this is a series that you can read again and again and again, and every time get something new from, I think. So I knew I was going to do it again, and one of the things I wanted to do on the channel was to do a reread of that and then incorporate all the other stuff, all the other Malazan stuff. So I did it with the privilege of reading the 2 series along with my friend AP Kahneman, and we have all these chats on the Malazan Book of the Fallen and novels of the Malazan Empire. Some of them including Stephen Erickson and Ian Esselmont. So it was a wonderful way for our channel to grow up with that series, I think. And it remains my
definitely.
favorite series of all time. It displaced Tolkien, which had been my number 1 forever since I read it as a kid, since I was 12 until I was, close to 50 years old. That was my favorite of all time. It takes something very special for me to say, yeah, this is my new favorite thing of all time. But Malazan did that. So, yeah.
Yeah,
I see above you there, the Realm of the Elderlings. That is another series that I consider to be one of the greats. I am just about done with it. This is an announcement, I guess. I don't think that Realm of the Elderlings will displace Malazan Book of the Fallen or Lord of the Rings for me. It's going to remain my number 3 series of all time, which is not too bad, really. But have you finished the entire series, Realm of the Elderlings?
no, absolutely not. I've only read the first 2 trilogies,
Okay, that's
so
pretty good.
my expectations are quite high because I thought Live Ship Traders ended particularly well.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed Ship of Destiny, um, but I'm a little bit cautious when it comes to Hobb because I find her character work a little inconsistent.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I know I'll probably just get everyone unsubscribed from my channel, which you know it makes no difference when you're a smaller channel as mine anyway. But yeah, I find with Hobb, like the character arcs sometimes are so well developed and the characters are so rich because obviously the thing that helps is her prose is so rich as well.
Yeah.
But sometimes I find that like inconsistencies in the motivations of the characters or the way that their inner monologues don't match their actions always,
Yeah.
and which you get with real people. I'm not saying you don't see those kind of inconsistencies in real life, and that makes it more realistic. But I think when I compare it to other authors, yeah, sometimes it does grate on me a little bit. And I love those books. I mean, if you've seen the reviews I've done for Robin Hobb's books, you'll know that I do love Realm of the Elderlings. But I feel like there's something there that's keeping it from, like you were saying. I remember you saying on one of your videos recently where you feel like some of those books could make it into like a top 10 or a top 20, but it wouldn't displace anything at the top. And I think there is something, and I can't quite, other than those character inconsistencies, I can't really pick any faults with it, but sometimes it does pull me out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always felt that with the very, very important exception of a character in Live Ship Traders. I can say the name, Kennett.
Yes.
With the exception of Kennett, I find that the villainous characters in Realm of the Elderlings tend to be, and part of this is a matter of perspective, because if you're getting, like, say, Fitz's perspective, you're not getting into the head of, say, Regal, and as a result, I think that choice of narrative perspective results in some flat villains. And when I use the word flat, I do not mean that in a disparaging way. Flat characters serve very important purposes, and they can be vivid, they can be interesting, but they're not multidimensional. And I find that the villainous characters, with that one huge exception, and that is a very big exception, uh, tend to be flatter. And that's obviously Robin Hobb knows exactly what she's doing. That was a deliberate choice on her part. And it's not even really a criticism. It's just an observation, I think, more than anything. But yeah, you can find series where there's more of an effort, a deliberate effort to explore what's behind the villain. How did they become this way? She does it with that one character, but for the most part, not with the other villains. They're just kind of more or less serving a narrative function. They don't feel multidimensional to me. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't have put it better. I even mentioned that in my reviews of the Live Ship Traders. I said that Kennett is the first time I feel like that we're able to round off all the other characters. Using a really three-dimensional villain, because
Yeah.
Sometimes, like you were saying about a character being really 3D, and you'd be able to understand their perspective, even if you're not given that exposition. Sometimes comes from the characters around them, especially if it's protagonist to antagonist. And if you haven't got like a 3D antagonist, sometimes that's really quite difficult. I know. I remember Mike always says, "Oh, I feel like I have to shake Fitz sometimes." I
Yeah.
don't think that's always necessarily to do with the fact that he's a bit of an idiot sometimes, and he makes decisions that are just like crazy. I think sometimes it's literally because you can't put yourself in his shoes, and it's because of points of view like that. I feel like if you, like you were saying, it's not necessarily about flat characters, because I mean, I love Tolkien, and Tolkien knew how to use a flat character.
Oh yeah,
Um,
big time.
but
Most of Tolkien's characters are flat. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, but you have to like look at that character from the other perspectives, the other angles, but
Right.
most importantly from the reader's angle.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, again, you've already basically said everything I would have said anyway. But yeah, I got that. Yeah, I got that exact same impression basically.
Yeah.
Um, which is it's so crazy, because it's like the character work can be like the best,
Absolutely.
or it can be inconsistent, which is very, very frustrating, because there's so many good characters and so many good character moments, and when the arcs are complete, they are so, like I say, they're so fulfilling and so rich that when it's not perfect, it stands out more.
Yeah.
Because I could read a pulp writer, some pulp crime fiction, and those characters won't ever be developed like a Robin Hobb character will be. But it doesn't need to be. But the consistency is there, even if the character is flat. The consistency is the authors consider it from so many angles. It's kind of irrelevant. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
when you drop off from a 10 out of 10, and the character level drops just a little bit in the Robin Hood book, you pick it up straight away because you're like, oh wow, that wasn't perfect. And that I find it like, yeah, a little bit jarring sometimes.
Yeah,
But
I
the
can
books
see
are
that. I
books
can
are
see
excellent.
that. Yeah, they're just marvelous. Like I said, I mean, my third favorite series of all time in all of literature. You know, that's not too bad. And I would
Definitely
say
not.
that in terms of emotional impact, and there are very few authors who consistently bring the tears for me, and
Mm.
Robin Hobb is one of them. You know, Stephen Erickson does it to me. Tolkien does it to me. Robin Hobb does it to me. John Gwynne does it to me, actually. And it's just but there aren't too many who, even some writers who I really love, like say Joe Abercrombie. I never cry reading an Abercrombie book. Maybe I wince a lot reading a first law book, and I laugh a lot, but it's not that kind of an emotional journey.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Definitely. I just feel like the thing Robin Hobb really did for me that I really appreciated is that she allowed me to enjoy female characters from a point of perspective that I could never appreciate.
Uh-huh.
Because I love saying John Gwynne has great female characters that are very strong, and you can really, you
Yeah.
can ride along with some of those characters like they were Aragorn in Lord of the Rings or something. They're just like very powerful protagonists. But like in Robin Hobb, it's like there's a characters like Mortar um, and Ronica and people like that who
Yeah.
who were really considering on a day-to-day basis things that I never ever occurs to me,
Yeah.
and considering people's thoughts and feelings in ways that I've never ever considered because it's not part of my paradigm. It's not part of my makeup to
Yeah.
to to, to be in that headspace at all. And those characters seem so much stronger than the kind of typical kind of hero character archetype character that
Yeah.
kind of can do anything, can take on any challenge. It's just like seeing what someone's kind of weaknesses are and how they manage to balance those in their day-to-day life and turn them into strengths, and how they can interact with other people in different ways. Those characters that Robin Hobb does, it just that really opened my eyes because it's like points of perspective that I just don't get in other books. I feel like fantasy is so good at kind of like opening you up to those kind of characters because it's hard to it's I find it's harder to relate to those characters and put them into situations where you can make them relatable to people that don't deal with those things on a daily basis, unless you've got a fantastical, kind of element to it.
Yep, that is one of the great strengths of fantasy, actually. And you can do a lot of social criticism and get away with it in fantasy that you can't necessarily do in a real world, novel and that sort of thing. Speaking of which, Terry Pratchett is it looks like a favorite of yours. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, here's the thing with Pratchett is this is I often in my mind books sit alongside movies, even though I prefer to read than watch a movie. It in that my tastes, I like to have things that offer different kind of flavors. And one thing I love about movies is a really good script, like something that's really sharp and witty, and where characters have got a really good discourse going. And I think Terry Pratchett, the
Mhm.
conversations and the humor and how sharp and fast it is very similar to there was a few classic authors and like literary works as well. Like I think Shakespeare is really really good for
Oh,
it.
sure.
Yeah, and I think I've really been enjoying the humor in Dumas books, and just how like tongue in cheek some of it is, and how sharp and witty it is. And I think Terry Pratchett gives me that as like a kind of like a palate cleanser almost.
Uh-huh.
What we can get because sometimes fantasy, modern fantasy especially, can be quite melodramatic. And I think sometimes you need something that's a little kind of a citrus to kind of cleanse the palate, something a little sharper.
Yep, yep.
So I think Pratchett's really good for that. So
That's
even
great.
though he probably wouldn't be in like my top five authors, I think he's probably one of the better writers of modern times. I
Uh-huh.
just think his vocabulary is crazy, and his ability to. I feel like I get this feeling like when I read his prose, so like it was effortless. He just kind of he threw it up on the page in an afternoon. You know, he never had to rewrite any of it. It just kind of just flew out of him naturally. Um,
Makes me curious to see how you will find Malazan humor, because believe it or not, I mean, it has a reputation for being this epic, massive, you know, dramatic, high tragedy, all of that, and these, you know, characters that are larger than life, and but there's humor in there, and it's a good thing it's there, I would tell you, because it is I mean, it is the definition for me of comic relief, because you need those moments, I think. They bring a lot of humanity to the series as well. But there's some witty banter in there, which, and I don't think Steven Erikson ever does cite Terry Pratchett as an influence. But there's a kind of wittiness that to the writing that actually Essamont shares. I call it Malazan humor because I see it in both of them, and I suspect strongly that it was something they developed in a way together as they were gaming this
yeah,
world, which you know that famously they gamed the Malazan world before they ever wrote anything in it. So I feel like and Malazan is famous for its humor. It's famous for its duos, and you can imagine these two kind of riffing off each other, you know, while gaming, and that made its way into a lot of the characters, I think. So I'll be curious to see what you think of that. Yeah.
well, it's funny you say that because one thing I'm hoping to get most from the series is really what I really love is that moment in a book where you realize that you've kind of got to know the author through the work, and you can kind of see the author reflected back at you through the characters, through the prose, through the conversations, the themes.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of hoping to get inside the head of Erickson and Esselman. I really want to get inside their head and know what
Yeah.
makes them tick, because that's the best thing about reading for me is like when the it takes a while sometimes. Sometimes it takes more than one book from an author. But when the penny drops and then you realize, oh, I know I've met someone like you. I know how you think, and I know what kind of things drive you, you know,
Yeah.
spiritually. You know, I know what kind of motivates you as a person and what you're interested in, and that's the best bit. That's when the
Yeah.
book really gets to that 5-star level, is when you can kind of see the reader. Like the book, you open the book up, and it's like a mirror to the author. You know.
I will say that publishing is about the closest thing you can do to becoming mentally naked to the world, you know.
You know.
I do have a bit of it. I mean, obviously, I haven't sold nearly as many books as someone like Steven Erikson, but enough to the point where I feel like probably some people have figured out some of the things that make me tick, and you know, there's a kind of vulnerability to that, you know. I think, but you know, you wouldn't do it if it, you know, if you didn't think it was important enough, I guess, to risk that kind of vulnerability. We're driven to do it for some reason or other. I have really no idea why people do write and publish books, except that we have to. You know, I feel like we have to. I think we need stories, and some of us feel compelled enough that we think, well, maybe I can add to this big cauldron of stories and see what people think, you know. So, but yeah, you've got lots of great stuff ahead. You mentioned Joe Abercrombie a moment ago.
Yeah.
Have you read everything First Law yet?
Absolutely not. I'm reading Best Served Cold in the summer.
Nice.
Um,
Okay.
like I do with a lot of things I like to spread them out. Because I'm not really on BookTube to get subscribers and make money and stuff. This is my channel is just a reflection of what I'm doing. Basically, it's
Yeah.
just a way for me to throw my trash into the ether, really. And
That's wonderful, though. I think one of the best things about BookTube channel is watching a person go through these series. I had read everything First Law before starting my channel that was published at the time. The only thing I got to talk about, makes me sad sometimes. The only thing I got to talk about as it was coming out was the Age of Madness trilogy, because everything else had already been out. So I'm kind of envious of you being in the position of being able to say, all right, I'm starting best served cold. Let's see what this is, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited because I know just by looking at my shelves how many great books I haven't read, and that's my biggest motivation. I am tearing into these books. It obviously doesn't seem that way because I'm a slow reader. I have
I
to
do.
sub vocalize everything. I have to imagine every scene and every button on every dress, and I have to do that. It's just the only way I can read. I have to reread every paragraph twice in case I missed something or there's a
It's
meaning.
me too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the way I enjoy reading. So I know it's going to take me, another like 10, 20 years to catch up with everyone else, but I actually prefer it that way. It makes me more excited to know that I've got all of this great stuff to read.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's a great problem to have. And to have on your shelves plenty of books that you have not yet read is important because it keeps your shelves exciting. So yeah.
definitely.
But so you've read the original trilogy then, I take it.
Yes, yeah, I enjoyed it greatly. I think, like you, I think there's certain characters that have depth in that series, and the rest are, they're a vehicle to push the story along, the action along, and it's
Uh-huh.
great. It's just great action, isn't it? It's a great world, and I think what's good about the J. Abercrombie that I've read, having only read those first three books, is he doesn't take too deep a vertical slice. He gives you enough world building, enough character
Yeah.
development to deliver what he was trying to do, and that's really important. I think if you're going to deliver a series like his, or John Gwynn's another one, I think he probably pushed the envelope a little bit harder than Joe Abercrombie, as far as how deep he decided to go with it.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree.
but you don't have to go the whole way, and sometimes there's extra depth there if you don't. If you don't, there doesn't have to be exposition for everything. You don't have to leave everything open to the reader. Um, so yeah, I appreciate that level of restraint as well. Not every book has to be a masterpiece.
Right.
Um,
Not every book is Lord
it's
of
a
the Rings. Yeah.
journey's worth experiencing.
Absolutely. I agree. So yeah, lots to look forward there for you in the First Law series. And my opinion is that Abercrombie's at his absolute best in Age of Madness. But there is something very endearing about the characters that he wrote in the original trilogy. So I think I could go with some of my favorite characters remain those, but in terms of the storytelling, the incorporation of theme, his skill as a writer, I feel like Age of Madness is his very best. And, and a lot of much stronger, more important female characters in Age of Madness as well. So he's really, I think, improved a lot as a writer, even though I love the First Law trilogy. So yeah, we
I have a question.
sure.
Do you feel like your best writing has come out of you yet? Do you feel like
No.
you've got no?
No, I don't. I feel, I personally believe, and not everyone agrees. I think you actually agree, that Return to Adan is the best writing I've published so far. And
Yes,
that I
definitely.
love my first two books. I love the way they're my children. I love the way of Adan and Prophet of Adan, but I think I really hit my stride in Return to Adan, and that what I do in the future will hopefully resemble that more than what I first did. And I think I needed to get that out of me too, though. I mean, The Way of Adan is in some ways just like a love letter to fantasy. And I feel like I um, did do some different things. It's not entirely just following the tropes and everything there. It's tropey for sure. But of course, you wouldn't have Return to Adan without The Way of Adan and Prophet of Adan. All that stuff had to happen first. But I think I went off on my own and Returned to Adan in some ways. And I will say, though, that one of the key differences might be that I read the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I read that after I wrote the first two, what would become the first two books. And I wrote the book three after I read Malazan Book of the Fallen. And so if there's any Malazan influence, it's really in the third book, in the Return to Adan. And I don't think I was really I don't consider myself like a disciple of Stephen Erickson or something like that. But what Erickson's writing did for me is it liberated my imagination. And it told me, oh, you can do this and that and this in fantasy. And I was like, whoa, okay. Yeah, you can do so much more in fantasy than I realized, you know. And that's what Malazan did for me, was kind of just freed me up a little bit, I think. So
Yeah,
I don't do you're of the opinion that Return is the best of the three, I think, right?
unbelievable. I think one of the biggest things that really upset me and frustrated me about last year is that, you know, Way of Dan got a lot of praise, and rightly so. But it's a travesty that no one gets to read Return to the Dan, because
Yeah.
it's it's so much. It's such a good book, and I feel like when you said earlier that, um, one of the closest things you can do to make yourself vulnerable is to publish your own work and stuff, and
Yeah.
then kind of put yourself out there. I really felt that with Return to the Dan, and I think, as you were saying then, that one thing that had happened to you had kind of changed your life or changed your perspective before you wrote that third book, and you can feel it because the and I said this in my review of the book. I think it was on my Goodreads review, that it's just the most honest book I read that year. It was
Uh-huh.
just, I felt like it was the most, like, as you're saying, like the most vulnerable a author had made themselves out of all the books I read last year. Um, and I remember thinking that about War and Peace, and
Uh-huh.
thinking that Tolstoy really bared everything, and
Mm.
he didn't care what people thought about him. He just put everything out there,
Yeah.
um, whether it was his politics, whether it was his, how he felt about human beings, and spirituality, and his own fears and everything. And he just really bared his soul in that book. And
Yeah.
it was the first time since that book I saw that level of like vulnerability on the page, and I just thought how refreshing in fantasy, because I see a little bit of that in Robin Hobb. Actually, that's one of, I think, another one of her really big strengths that I didn't see necessarily in like a Joe Abercrombie or John Gwynne, even though I
Uh-huh.
might have enjoyed some of those characters and some of those set pieces better. um, I've been looking for that connection, and I felt like you kind of blindsided me with it a little bit, because I thought I knew where I was going. Uh, but even though all three books are so different in that trilogy that you wrote, I kind of still felt like I knew what was coming, and it bowled me over in the end, because I felt like I was kind of dragged along with you, even though I felt like a kite in a storm, getting blown around and not really knowing where I was going.
Uh-huh.
Um, it was, yeah, it was a different experience to what you usually get in fantasy, and that's what I think is the travesty. It's just like, I just want people to catch up. I just want people to catch up and get onto the third book, so I can have those discussions with them, and just talk about the fact that this book just came out of nowhere, basically. I know I don't mean to sound negative towards the other two books, because
No, 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 no.
it was a very incredibly solid trilogy. Um, but that third book, I was just shocked. I couldn't believe I was reading some of it. Not just because I think you'd improved as a writer, but I could tell that it was almost like you'd found out something about yourself.
Yeah.
In the time you've been writing the trilogy, you were like a different person. And I feel like I didn't understand um, about sacrifice and honor and things like that until I read Tolkien as a child, until I read
Uh-huh.
like Lord of the Rings. And then I didn't really understand about you know like spirituality, and and being a good human being until I'd read other things, whether that's Russian literature, whether it's reading the Bible. It's just like certain things you read will change the way you see things and the way you are as a person. I just felt like to see that in encapsulated in one trilogy, like some kind of journey there, that's really interesting, because I feel like on a reread I'll get more inferences as to exactly what changed for you, and I find that enjoyable. And I often see like on BookTube, people make like a desert island books, like books they would like to take to a desert island and they feel like I can just keep rereading them and
Yeah.
finding new things. I think that's all to do with the connection with the author, because you get to learn. It's like having someone come along with you to the island, and you kind of get to know them a little bit better on rereads. I think that's the kind of book I always look for. As much as I love just straight entertainment, and I'll read like a pulpy crime thriller or something like that, and I'll just absolutely love it still. But I'll love it in a way that when I watch a movie, it won't be the way that I enjoy a piece of literature necessarily. So
Yeah. Cool.
I
Wow.
could just ramble forever, Philip. I could just be here for hours. So,
That's great. I mean, I like rambling, but I did want to talk about one other author you mentioned earlier, and I don't know how much of his stuff you've read so far, but one of my favorites as well, Mark Lawrence. And you mentioned him as one of the ones that people turned you on to when you were beginning to say, okay, what's next? So
definitely.
what have you read of Mark Lawrence's so far?
Just the initial trilogy.
Okay,
Is
Broken Empire.
Broken Empire. Um, yeah, someone I worked with at the time said, "Listen, this is your best entry point." They said, "Look, there's this guy Brandon Sanderson, but you're probably not going to like him because I know you, and it's not your kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
You want something a little bit different, and to kind of hold your attention. So I recommend Mark Lawrence, just for the immediacy.
By the way, you
Um,
have some really nice friends at work who give good recommendations.
it's well, I've been blessed in that over the last kind of like 15 years, I've been in the position to hire a lot of people to work with me.
Uh-huh.
So I've tried to hire people that I think are like really good human beings.
Oh,
I'm most of the time when I'm looking for a colleague, I'm not looking for someone that's like the best at what they do necessarily, but just someone that's gonna work well as a team, and someone
yep.
that's just nice to be around, that's gonna do
We
the
do
right
that when
thing
we hire
morally.
colleagues at a college too. I mean, it's an open secret. You want somebody who's qualified, but you also want somebody who's you can talk to and who won't be an idiot, in the hallway.
Basically.
So yeah, yeah. So anyway, Mark Lawrence they recommended, and you read the Broken Empire trilogy, which I
Yes.
think is an incredible psychological journey. I mean, it
Yes.
is. Yes, it's very disturbing in places because of where the protagonist and narrator goes, but it is a fascinating study in trauma and what trauma does, and that's where I fell in love with Mark Lawrence's writing myself, and I've read three of his trilogies now, and I've read The Book That Wouldn't Burn, which I think, well, it was my favorite book of 2023. So that should tell you how much I enjoyed that one. Yeah. So do you think
Yes, he's a funny author because I feel like he feels to me when I read his stuff, it's like he feels like a science fiction author that has the site that just loves fantasy.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because it doesn't like you can't put it in a box of fantasy like other fantasy authors. It doesn't have the same feel.
So true.
The way it's structured and stuff, and the way it's edited is it feels like science fiction. He's like big on ideas. He's big
Yep.
on making sure the reader's always engaged and entertained and stuff like that. He doesn't waste a lot of prose. So
Yep.
he's very efficient, and I find that's much more akin to like sci-fi. So I always think of like someone like sci-fi, but they don't like fantasy. That might be the way in. If
That
they can
is one of
handle
the
the content,
best.
obviously it's quite
That is one
out
of the
there.
best, most insightful comments I've heard on Mark Lawrence, what you just said. And I agree entirely. And you can get fairly far into a Mark Lawrence trilogy and think you're reading fantasy, but at a certain point you realize, oh wait, no, wait, this is science fiction. And he just doesn't care about those genre boundaries. And I love
No,
that. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. I love any author that's like that. That's just they've got their vision and they're not putting it in a box. They're not trying to appeal to a demographic. And it's that first book, Prince of Thorns, is extremely divisive.
Yep.
But I think a lot of those books, and I kind of hate Goodreads for this reason. It's like when
Oh,
you
join the
aggregate
club.
when you aggregate something,
Yep.
it loses its soul almost. You can't find the hooks, the things to kind of get hooked on. You can't. They kind of just get lost. Um,
Yep.
and I'm hoping that in the Stormlight archive, I'll see something from Brandon Sanderson that's a little less safe. because I think as much as I enjoyed Mistborn, it was like the safest thing I'd ever read.
Uh-huh.
Um, it
Yeah.
was just, yeah, I never felt challenged as a reader um, by it, and that was quite frustrating because I feel like it's been polished so much,
Uh-huh.
and it's just so it's just too round and shiny. I'm not very good at putting this into words really,
Right, right,
um, yeah,
right.
I really struggled with that to kind of for it to hook me.
I feel
Just
like Mistborn, I read it and enjoyed it. But I was already a very dedicated fantasy reader by then. And I know so many people who I've talked to for this, for Dear Dr. Fantasy, for your A Song of Ice and Fire, and it was Mistborn for them. It was the thing that brought them back into reading, that made them a fan of fantasy, you know. And so I have to, I've said it many times, but I think we all owe Brandon Sanderson for bringing so many people into the genre, which is great.
definitely,
You know,
definitely.
so I try not to be negative about, an author like him. And I don't think it is negative to say I believe that Brandon Sanderson is an extremely talented YA author. And I don't mean YA as an insult at all. I think that's very,
Definitely
very
not.
important.
Definitely not.
And that's what he does. That's his wheelhouse, I believe. And he does do some, adult-ish themes in the Stormlight Archive, but really I feel like where he's comfortable as a writer, and I've only read Mistborn and the first three Stormlight Archive books, so people can feel free to disagree with me, but I feel like where he's really great, where he thrives, and where he's had the most important influence is as a more of a YA level type writer. And that's great. And sometimes by the way, I do like to read YA, and enjoy it. But I think that being that kind of writer basically means it's less complex in terms of the prose. It's less complex in terms of the exploration of theme. Now, there are themes there. I'm not saying there aren't themes. They're there, but I don't think that's what's driving the narrative. He's telling a more entertaining story, and leveling up with the characters. Yeah, okay, let's see what when Kaladin masters this skill. How cool is that?
Mm.
And that's fun. We enjoy that sort of thing. The way I compare it in a way to the MCU, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you enjoy seeing these characters discover who they are and level up, and also it's similar to the MCU in the sense that there are all these Easter eggs. If you're into the Cosmere, you get all these little references to, and that's fun.
Yeah, everyone loves that. Everyone loves that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but that's what it is to me. I mean, it's
Mm.
not. I don't think Brandon Sanderson is ever going to produce, even though I think maybe Stormlight Archive might be an attempt, but I don't think it's just his thing to do something like Realm of the Elderlings or Malazan Book of the Fallen,
Yeah.
or Jenny Wirtz's Wars of Light and Shadow. These are first and foremost, I think, literary works, and they also happen to be fantasy. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas Brandon Sanderson is writing YA fantasy, and it's brilliant and it's fun and it's great, but I don't look for as much depth when I'm reading, at least so far. Now, somebody can say, well, actually, this Brandon Sanderson's book is really deep. You should try this. But so far from what I've seen, that's my take, at least.
I genuinely thought it was coming. I kind of
Mhm.
got maybe lulled into a false sense of security with the Final Empire. I thought I was getting,
Uh-huh.
initially picking that book up and kind of reading the first, dozen chapters. I think I was going to get something that was very like Dickensian and something that was very like I was going to get some political satire and some social commentary. And it really felt like it was going to go that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was in making it a trilogy because that second book felt forced. I don't know what was about the second book in that trilogy, but it just felt like it was kind of shoehorned in, whether or not it was the publisher or the editors or what. But it just felt like he left that original concept
Yeah.
behind.
Well, it's
that he's
rarely
striving for. But
it's rarely satisfying when a book isn't what we want it to be, right? Right. Whereas I I feel like is one of the things we can do here on BookTube is hopefully to help give people um, expectations that fit the experience. And so if you tell me ahead of time, Mistborn is a fun read, it's great YA fantasy, it's got this cool intricate magic system that you can geek out about, and I find it to be all those things, I'm gonna love it, you know. But if you go into it thinking this is a literary masterpiece and you're gonna get all this depth and thematic stuff going on, maybe I won't like it as much, you know. I think so.
absolutely, and I enjoyed that trilogy. I think I gave all the books 4 stars. Um,
Uh-huh. That's
yeah,
great. Yeah.
they're all great fun. Um, I just when I came back to reading, it was predominantly just to reread Tolkien stuff and
Uh-huh.
find the next Song of Ice and Fire, and really to just kind of catch up on some classics and stuff that I'd missed. Um, and yeah, I obviously read the signals wrong, because I think if I'd gone in with the expectation of Mistborn as being similar to Sharp, I love the Sharp books,
Uh-huh.
and you always know what you're going to get with the Sharp books. You're going to get action set pieces, you're going to get some men's adventure novels, you get some war, and it's always you're always going to get 4-star entertainment, and that's exactly what I got from Mistborn. I just wasn't. That's not, as you were saying, just not what I was expecting to get when I went in there,
Yeah.
because whether they like it or not, all of these authors get lined up next to each other.
Yep.
Brandon Sanderson and Mark Lawrence and John Gwynne and Stephen Erickson, then they're almost nothing like each other most of the times.
Right.
And
Right.
the reading experiences are so different. But without people like yourself, who and AP, I think is fantastic at this as well, because
Oh yeah.
he's so much more intelligent than I'll ever be, and it's just nice to hear him kind of go into the depth.
Join the club. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's well, you get people like that, don't you? There's nothing you can do about it really. It's like I always think of like Steve Donahue, because he reads like over 1,000 books every year to review.
Hmm.
And it's just like you're never going to catch up with the guy as far as his knowledge of books goes. So you might as well just be like, oh, if I need a reference material for this, I'll go to this person. And you and AP are the people in fantasy for that, really.
Oh.
It's certainly not my it's certainly not my job, Tom,
Well, AP
unfortunately.
needs a nemesis, and I fulfill that role pretty well, at least. So, yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, no, I think I will happily finish Stormlight Archive, the first. I guess he's doing 2 arcs or whatever they're being called, and I will definitely finish the first one. I still need to read Rhythm of War. I put it off till this year because I thought, I missed the boat, so let me just read it
Yeah,
before the 5th one comes out and I'll be fresh. I'm a little bit scared about the 4th one based on what I've heard, because I really enjoyed. I thought the first 2 were very entertaining. And then the 3rd one got a little tedious for me, Oathbringer. And a little bit too much about, the magic and how it works, and, maybe a little too much Cosmere stuff in there for me, because I'm not a Cosmere reader really. So,
yeah,
and I'm afraid Rhythm of War is going to be more of that sort of thing, but we'll see. I'll read it and we'll see. Yeah. But Mark Lawrence, if you do intend to continue reading his stuff, one thing to know is that the only trilogy that is grimdark is Broken Empire. The rest of his stuff is not grimdark. And I think that's one thing that's not said enough about Mark Lawrence, because a lot of people know about Broken Empire and that's all they know, and they think he's grimdark. And actually he's not. Like, almost everything he's written is not grimdark, with the
yeah,
exception of that initial trilogy. But you tend to get sort of branded by your debut, and that's
yeah,
where people lump you into that category. But yeah, his Book of Wood and Burn, the opening of the library trilogy, is some of the most innovative, interesting stuff I've seen. You can find influences in there. As I said before, there's nothing new under the sun, but but he's doing something that is about as different as you can get, I think, in the library trilogy. Plus, taking on some really important themes that are just so relevant to life today. I mean, yeah, some of them are the the usual themes that are important for just people of all times and places, but like identity and where it comes from, and othering and stuff like that, memory and the nature of identity and how it stems from memory, and how deceptive memory is, and so on
Oh,
and so
super
on.
interesting
Oh, it's
subject. Yeah,
great stuff.
very, very interesting.
But also knowledge and where it comes from. And this is, I mean, without ever once having anything like the internet in the actual story, he's writing about the internet in some way. It's fascinating, actually, the way he's going about it. But where knowledge comes from, and the storage of knowledge, and how it's a collective possession of a sort, but also who decides what types of knowledge get privileged, and how reliable is it, and all of this. So it's great stuff. And there's a giant library. So, I mean, what book lover wouldn't, want that kind of thing? So yeah. So where do you feel like you'll be going with your channel? I know that I haven't really told people out there yet exactly what you do. You do these wonderful shorter videos that are reviews and other things. But what are you thinking about in terms of where you'd like to go with the channel? Do you want to just continue kind of making it up as you go along, or do you have a vision or anything like that?
No, I would like to dazzle you with grand plans, Philip, but it's just not the case. I just plan to keep reading, really. I have set myself
It's
a
a good plan.
challenge to read 50 classics that I really think are going to be important to kind of round out. I don't believe in
Let's
reading
watch
classics I
that
don't think I'm
video.
going to enjoy.
That was a good video. Yeah.
Yeah. But actually, that list is actually over 100 books now. But I will keep reading classics alongside my favorite genres like fantasy and science fiction and historical fiction. And yeah, in just the vain hope that really cool people on the internet might want to talk to me about it one day, and that is that's about it really. Um, yeah, I just it's just my favorite hobby at the moment, really, reading.
Yeah.
Um, and anytime that I'm not working, and I can't, spend time with the family, it's just reading. That's it.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of work time at the moment where I don't get to see my family, so it's just handy to have a book, um, spend some time reading and just trying to open my mind up a little bit and
Wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, and think about life in different ways.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to read, and then it's wonderful to come here and engage with people and have our reading experiences sometimes confirmed and sometimes challenged and sometimes enlarged upon in the course of discussing these wonderful books. And I so agree with you that it's about that. Whatever the size of your channel, and I cannot even pretend to understand why some channels blow up and why others don't, and what, honestly, that is so not important to me as well. I want to be here for the discussions, and I know that's not exactly sexy on YouTube right now, is these long form discussions. They
Yeah,
keep
I
telling
know
me
what you
to make
mean.
these shorts, and I'm like, what? I don't know what you want me to do. Stop it. So, but yeah, it's about this. It's about the interactions for me. And I once saw this funny comment on your channel. I don't know if it was a bot or if it was a real human or something. But it was this one of these things where, oh yeah, if you pay me money, I'll show you how to grow your channel, and and all this stuff. And I loved your response to it. Because they asked a question in their little
Yeah,
thing.
most likely.
It was something like, do you ever wonder why your channel isn't growing, and blah blah blah, and they were gonna, for money, make your channel blow up and all this. And I loved your response. It was something like, well, I always assumed it was just because no one likes me. It made me laugh so hard. which is so not true, by the way. I think you're an extremely likable person, and I hope that more people do come across your channel. And I encourage everyone, there will be a link in the description to Big Al Does BookTube. But whatever the size of the channel, we're just lucky to be here, aren't we?
That we're lucky to be alive, and that's how I feel every morning. Basically, every day I wake up, it's like, oh, this amazing magic, this consciousness just happened to just happen again, and here
Yeah,
we are, just remembering what we did yesterday. How did that work? I don't know, but I'm
that is
amazed by it every day, basically.
that is the best attitude toward life, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's worked for me, definitely.
yeah, yeah. Keeping you open, I think, to the wonder of the whole thing. It's a grand mystery, and we're here. So let's just make the best of it, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun, and I didn't mention this earlier, but Al has been soldiering through a migraine the entire time we've been talking, which is very brave, and it's awesome. You did a wonderful job of looking like you're not in agony right now. So,
Do you remember Dumbo, the movie?
oh yeah,
The movie Dumbo. You know when he
yeah,
gets drunk and he sees the dancing pink elephants around him. I've
yeah.
had the craziest light show going on around me in a circle. Like it's like looking into a kaleidoscope the entire time. It's been
Yep.
I feel like we had like a shared acid experience or something this whole time. It's
Yeah,
really
psychedelic, man.
yeah, it's been really crazy. I'm
I
never
get
gonna forget it.
migraines too, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So yeah, my hat's off to you for braving that, and I will let you go though. Everybody, just because Al did this with a migraine, you should go and sub, really. So, but also because it's a wonderful channel. He's a great guy. I think you can all tell. And if you want to hear someone reflecting on their literary journeys with some depth and a sense of wonder, go and check out Big Al Does BookTube. And I'd like to thank you, Al, once again for being
Thanks,
here.
sir.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time.